Abdurrahman Usman Jibrila reports that the continuous closure of the border. Interesting reports there. No matter how anybody approaches it, there is still great cheering news that 4 borders have been reopened, and then of course we are also looking at other borders to be reopened before the end of the year. Now let's start from there. There should be lessons learned from the closure of these borders from the first instance.
Thank you very much, Kenneth. Well, the first lesson that we should place on the table is that all those issues that were causative factors that led to the closure of the border in the first place should be avoided by all parties, all actors. And then specifically, we need to also look at a situation where the general public, both the general travel public as well as operators of businesses or cross-border businesses, must also come to terms with a documentation of the facts and figures regarding the closure of the border up until its reopening. You know why this is important? This is important because we need to find out what exactly happened that led to the closure of the border in the first place. 2, we need to underscore what were the actions taken by government and other stakeholders during the processes of, during the period of the border closure. 3 is that we need to also understand these actions that were taken, what were the results that were manifesting. And 4, we need to also understand the cost and the benefits of the border closure. And when I'm talking about cost and benefits, this also need to be quantitative enough in terms of figures, in terms of statistics. This is very important because we need to forestall future occurrences. And for you to forestall that, you must at a point go back to history, and the history is the reference material, which is this documentation we're talking about here. And that documentation would also begin to be very, very apt for anybody who is trying to make a policy, create a policy referring to border by tomorrow. And therefore, it becomes very important for every actor to know what had transpired. But beyond this, we need to begin to talk to ourselves. Now that the border has been reopened, are there lessons? Of course, we have got some report here that, some of the borders are still not fully opened. The cheering news is still there that we still have orders that will be reopened by 31st of of December, preparatory to the AFCFTA implementation that comes up on the 1st of January 2021. Now, the point is that while we are having that cheering news, we must also underscore the fact that the traders themselves, the manufacturers, the farmers, the transporters, logistic operators, and all the paraphernalia of their activities along the border and the corridor routes must now come to terms with reality. If you have stayed off business, off that track for over 16 months, the borders, by the way, were closed on the 20th of August 2019. And up till this point, if you had been shut down, it means you must be careful. You must beware of anything that will lead to the closure of such borders again.
Yes, again. That brings us to the question of the documents you raised.
Thank you very much.
That means all stakeholders must adhere to whatever comes out of
Absolutely.
That document for future occurrence.
Absolutely.
Now, still talking about that, Dr. Ukaoha, insecurity was also part of the reasons why those borders were closed in the first place. I'm sure those lessons are still paramount now.
They are very, 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 more than any time, very paramount. Because if you are not secured in the first place, you are not going to do business. Anybody who is going to enter into any business must have his head covered, shielded, protected. And therefore, if we still have such killings here and there, and then from one point to another, you are so much afraid and you are not sure of what is going to happen, there is no way you can go along with you ways, commodities, items for, sale. And it depresses the economy. It also depresses individual pockets in terms of incomes. And it confuses the entire environment in the sense that this is what has led us to where we are today, recession, economic recession. And therefore, anybody who looks at the border closure must first of all think of security. And so, one important reason why the borders were closed in the first place was that smugglers and unscrupulous members of the society, some vagabonds who masqueraded themselves as traders, were pulling in small arms and light weapons. Not only that, they were also peddling drugs across the border, all in the name of trade. And these are illegitimate, businesses that have found themselves in the attack of the economy, but also the attack of the social status of every Nigerian.
In all of this, Dr. Ukaoha, has there been any evidence or reports of some of your members being engaged in those dastardly acts?
Now, I have to say this. There are a lot of genuine traders we have here, and I'm going to talk about that later. But then there are also people who masquerade as traders. They are not traders. These are smugglers. These are people who do not have legitimate means of livelihoods, and then they parasite with such activity, and then begin to destroy the economy. And of course, as a member of the ECOWAS Heads of State Task Force on Trade, I have been able to see with my two eyes situations where we met on the borders, and then we stopped people, and then we saw that, hey, by the way, this bag of rice contains more than a bag of rice. This bag of beans contains more. And shockingly, these are opened and you see AK-47s, right, lying, in state in those bags of rice. And you'll be so shocked. We've seen a situation where you see, bullets mixed inside food items and peddled. These are not people who are thinking good, who are patriotic, who are doing businesses. Yes. You can't call them traders.
And that's what the government is really fighting.
Exactly.
So the closure of those borders,
it made sense.
Made a lot
of sense.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ukaoha. Let's talk more after the break. You're watching Weekend File on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. Stay with us for more on this incisive discussion after the break.
To help my generation. Ina zaune ne a Plateau na business. Kuma ina yin wannan domin ci gaban ƙasar Najeriya.
This message is from the National Orientation Agency.
Welcome back. Megatari land border in Jigawa State is strategic in the federal government's quest to make Nigeria an agricultural Ken Ukaoha, as we continue the dialogue on border reopening and its impact on the economy. Dr. Ukaoha, the reports are so self-explicit. They have told us exactly what is going on in Seme border, and of course in Megatari, where of course activities have hit the ground running. Now, Ilela and Ofum, where there are some low activities or partial, if you may use that word. So what do we do, or what do the people over there need to do, to hit the ground running?
I think if you listened to people from that axis, you would have heard when they were talking about officials of government waiting for signal from the presidency. So whoever is responsible for sending such signals must have to do that as quickly as possible, so that we act like people who are really ready, prepared for actions. And it will help us also to sustain the level of image we want others to see us, with. At the level of the International Committee of Nations. Because if the president announces and then somebody from one particular axis is not acting, or waiting for another directive, then it does not really help matters. But beyond this, I want us to also begin to look at it from other perspectives. When we talk about semi-border, I want a situation where we would also go back to the lessons that, are learned. For instance, if you move to, semi-border today, you will see this particular night, you will observe a deluge of activities going on. And you'll be asking yourself, is this a market or a border station? So there is no distinction between border and market. So I think this is one lesson I thought would have been learned by our government.
Especially by the customs.
Exactly. Not just the customs, but then the government. Are we locating a market at the border? Because this is where a lot of atrocities happen. There must be a distinguishing factor between the border and any other place where transactions are done. The border is not a place where you buy and sell. No. I was of the thinking that we should have learned that lesson, so that if we are going to build or construct or locate a market for international transactions, it should be way away from that market. Number 2 lesson is the issue of bribery. I think that it's important that now that we have come out of this, all the past lives, in quote, the past activities that, made us look dirty, should be done away with. In terms of bribery, harassment, unnecessary intimidations by officials of government, these things should be gone and be said bye-bye to. Number 3 is the activities of border communities. In the past, before the closure of the border, in fact, permit me to use this word, most of the border communities were smelling in the sense that they were patrons of smuggling activities, so to speak. Smelling in the sense that they were even supporters and shielders of smugglers. And you cannot distinguish between,
and that is corruption.
And that's terrible. That's terrible.
And the government is against
and most of these people, I must be very brutal here. Most of these people even, connive to fight the customs officials, government officials that are wearing uniform. I've seen a situation where, where these smugglers connive with border communities there and tear the uniforms off our...
Of course, with some corrupt officials.
That's another one.
That's exactly where we are heading to.
Yes.
To see that ugly scenario is completely,
we need to erode them completely. We need to completely,
because the gains of the closure and reopening of the borders must not be thrown by the side.
We shouldn't, and that's why I was really, and I keep hammering on the need for that clear documentation, so that every actor
will be part of it.
Will be part of it and
Okay.
see himself or herself and in the mirror.
Okay, Dr. Ukaoha, one more question before we let you go. Of course, last month, the Nigerian, the federal government ratified the African Continental Free Trade Agreement. How does that help in all of these discussions, even as the borders are reopening?
Okay, by 1st of January, just this coming week, Nigeria will be part and parcel of the implementation of the AFCFTA that is taking off. And so, the borders are the corridors for transaction of cross-border trade, if you like, the continental trade. And moreover, Article 5B of the AFCFTA that we are implementing, and by the way, Nigeria has also deposited the instrument of ratification at the African Union. That article I referred to notes that the regional economic communities, in this case ECOWAS as one of the 8 of them, will be the building block to the AFCFTA implementation. Now, if you're looking at regional economic communities becoming the building blocks, it means that whatever we're doing with Benin Republic, whatever we're doing with Niger Republic, because we are all in the same conclave, regional economic community, that is the building block to the implementation of the AFCFTA, and that's why we need to be very careful. That's why we need to
Nigeria
know what we're doing with them. Yes.
Before ratifying.
And whatever we are discussing, whatever we are going to do, we must sit down properly. I know that there's a tripartite agreement that needs to be signed between Nigeria, Benin Republic, and Niger Republic. I want that to be signed immediately. In fact, that ought to have been signed before the reopening of the border and before the implementation of the AFCFTA.
All right, so generally, this exercise is indeed a step in the right direction.
It is absolutely commendable.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ken Ukaoha.
Thank you so
Thanks
much.
for coming on Weekend File. We'll be speaking with Dr. Ken Ukaoha, President, National Association of Nigerian Traders, and we'll be discussing on the border reopening and its impact